Propaganda. The word has an overbearing negative connotation. Why is this? What exactly are the implications behind the word? Defining propaganda has long been an issue, and often drawing the line between propaganda and other forms of persuasion proves difficult. In its broadest sense, most forms of persuasion are a type of propaganda. However, there is good persuasion, which relies on the fair representation of solid evidence, and there is faulty persuasion, which uses logical fallacies and attempts to stir the audience with emotion. Let's explore this. Why did I choose to make the word on the screen red? I'll tell you why. It's because I wanted the word to come off as aggressive, fiery, and strident. I wanted to play on your emotions. But what if I chose a different color? Say, light blue. Well, propaganda doesn't seem so bad anymore. My ill-concealed color trickery may prove innocent enough. But what happens when propaganda becomes dogmatic? In the following clip, neuroscientist and author Sam Harris explores the role of religious propaganda during the antebellum slave debates.
The Bible is the best book we have in the West, in ethical terms. We should be practicing slavery. The creator of the universe clearly expects us to keep slaves. He simply tells us not to beat our slaves so severely that we put out their eyes or their teeth. Jesus clearly expected us to keep slaves. He never criticizes the institution of slavery. He uses analogies with slaves. Paul in 1 Timothy admonishes slaves to serve their masters well and to serve their Christian masters especially well, so that they can partake in their holiness. If the abolitionists were absolutely on the wrong side of a theological debate. If this is the wisest book we have, the slaveholders of the South were right.
Let's further explore the idea of propaganda within the context of the slave debates. Over the course of the next few minutes, I will attempt to show that there exists a commonality of poor persuasion between Christian abolitionists, pro-slavery Southerners, and D.W. Griffith's portrayal of the Reconstruction era in his 1915 silent film, The Birth of a Nation. The Birth of a Nation. A film as famous for its innovative film techniques as it is for its radical ideologies. Perhaps for most audiences it goes without saying that The Birth of a Nation is an unfair representation of both the war and Reconstruction era. However, it may prove significant to note how exactly Griffith propagates his message. The movie is entirely fabrication. Griffith's misrepresentation of the era comes from his omission and exaggeration. In this scene, a group of slaves dance and celebrate after a hard day's work. While this may have happened on occasion, it tells nothing of the brutal life of the American slaves and seems to suggest a happy lifestyle. We see Griffith use emotional manipulation. By making the antagonist black and the protagonist white, Griffith hopes the audience will associate black with sinister, while empathizing with the white hero. This type of emotional propaganda seen in Griffith's film can be applied to slavery in a more general sense.
I have seen the oppression of my people in Egypt, and have heard their cry.
Stop it! Leave that man alone!
So I have come down to deliver them out of slavery, and bring them to a good land. A land flowing with milk and honey. And so unto Pharaoh I shall send you.
Many American slaves who inherited the Christian religion of their captors saw stark parallels between the Hebrews of the Old Testament and their own misfortune. The Bible stories such as Exodus had stirred the emotions of slaves and abolitionists alike for decades prior to the Civil War. African-American scholar Albert Raboteau proposes that as early as 1774, American slaves were declaring publicly and politically that they thought Christianity and slavery were incompatible. Could this strong emotional argument put forth by Christian slaves and abolitionists be justified by an analysis of biblical canon? It is evident that biblical text strongly supports the institution of slavery, suggesting that Christian abolitionists, akin to Griffith's film, provided an emotional argument, both omitting and defying evidence, resulting in a logical fallacy. Although the intents and accomplishments of Christian abolitionists are praiseworthy, this honorable empathy was forced to emerge through a conduit of contradictions. Conversely, the religious propaganda used by Southern slaveholders differs from that of Griffith's stance in A Birth of a Nation, in that it did not require the omission or exaggeration of evidence, at least not of the biblical kind. The use of poor persuasion used by slaveholders springs from an issue that is still very alive today: faith, the ability to believe something without evidence, an impermeable authority which cannot be questioned. When this type of dogmatic, irrational thinking is spread by propaganda, the results are very often catastrophic. In the following clip, the late Christopher Hitchens discusses slavery and other immoral institutions within the context of faith.
Morally normal and intelligent people find themselves saying fatuously wicked things when this subject. The suicide bombing community is entirely faith-based. The genital mutilation community is entirely faith-based. Slavery is mandated by the Bible. People keep hearing how many abolitionists were Christians. Well, it was about time that they took a stand against it, having mandated it for so long. So it's not even a tautology, I think, to say that there's a relationship between the human impulse to do evil, to be selfish, to be self-centered, to be greedy, and a contrast between that and faith, because given only faith, mountains can be moved, and millions of people who would never normally acquiesce in evil are brought to it straight away and with ease, and with self-righteousness. There, that's my answer to that.
Let's explore the role of propaganda in an immediately modern issue. Here, as you most likely know, is Joseph Kony. Over the past 2 decades, this man has used religious propaganda to convert children into soldiers for his guerrilla war, resulting in the deaths and suffering of thousands. However, Invisible Children Inc., a non-profit awareness group, has used viral marketing and propaganda tactics to counter Kony's progress. Much like the slave debates of the antebellum South, we see here that propaganda can be a double-edged blade. So if propaganda can be both a great benefit and detriment to mankind, how do we know when to trust it? Surely those who believed in the values of Griffith's The Birth of a Nation truly thought they were justified and righteous. Will future generations look back on today's institutions with as much disdain as we do for slavery? How do we avoid falling victim to ignorant propaganda? Well, one might attempt to be aware of emotional manipulation and the intentions of others. But, perhaps most of all, in the words of Hitchens, take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way. Thank you.